one. I'm not trading Troy Franklin and Quentin Johnson for DeAndre Swift. We don't know how much longer DeAndre Swift's got as far as being like a real prominent fantasy football running back. The second round pick, 2026, you probably drafted him in the third round. So you're getting a round back of value for a guy legitimately could be the number one receiver for this team moving forward. Because it's not like Sean Payton's going to invest high draft capital. The highest draft capital they invested this past year was Pat Bryant. It was a day 3 pick. And he's going after that type of guy. The Troy Franklin mold is what he wants. And he doesn't spend high draft capital on wide receivers. So I don't think Franklin really gets replaced by anybody in the draft next season, which is why with his draft profile, I don't think it's as much of an issue because of where he is and the regime and how they value those things. So that's real interesting. And Tyrone Tracy, like they're moving on from Tyrone. As long as Cam Scatterbo doesn't get hurt and everything, like Tyrone Tracy's dead in the water next season. So most of this, I'm saying no, because of the way they utilize Franklin. I don't see that stopping. You guys, they have taken a version of Oregon's offense, of what Bo Nix and Troy Franklin did together, and they're putting it on the Denver Broncos. That's what's happening right now. Yep. And that's why he's getting targeted. And that's why he's being decent. And isn't it super uber exciting? No. But does it make him a top 24 receiver when you're getting 8 to 10 targets every single week and he's been doing it for 5 weeks now? Yeah, it does. That's my sense on it.
Yeah.
I would refute anything in that if I could, but I can't. So I won't. I mean, yeah, Tyrone Tracy is a moot point because Cam Scatterbo became Cam Scatterbo. I wasn't crazy on Franklin coming into the draft process. When I saw that he went the same place Bo Nix did, it kind of piqued my interest. The performance that he's shown this season with Nix, I'm much higher on Franklin than I was previously. There is something there. They're BFFs. They love their chuthers, and Bo Nix is going to continue to throw the ball Troy Franklin's way. So I agree with you. Outside of Bowers, who is the only truly elite option, of any of the names of any of the whatevers that we've thrown out there in these trade scenarios, Bowers is the only elite option that we've talked about. Do what you can. If you can do something like this, like I realized you're pairing Franklin, who has fantasy juice, with a first round pick for Bowers, but you are going to find a replacement for Franklin much sooner than you're going to find a replacement in your lineup for Brock Bowers. You grab Brock Bowers if you can. Outside of that, I agree with you, Dan. I don't really want to do any of these trades. I'm not excited about any of them. I think if you're trying to sell Franklin, don't undersell him because he will have juice going forward. He's on a team with a quarterback who loves him, a team who believes in him. And his performance the last month and a half or so has shown that, yeah, he can be a fantasy asset regardless of what any of us thought about him, a year and a half ago. So yeah, the DeAndre Swift thing, there's no guarantees. Tyrone Tracy, we already talked about, he's out. I don't want to undersell, for a second or a third, or Ollie Gordon. Ollie Gordon, I know everybody loves Ollie Gordon, but I'm not sure why, because he's definitely behind Devon Achane. Jalen Wright has been a disappointment across the board, but he's much faster than Ollie Gordon, and he's much closer to what Devon Achane gives you in that offense, and they want to use Devon Achane, not Ollie Gordon, in that offense. And Kyle Williams is for better or worse, he's a New England wide receiver, and we know their history with wide receivers and wide receivers they've drafted. I like Kyle Williams, but he's in New England. Take that for what you will. These are not great deals for Troy Franklin outside of the Bowers one.
Yeah, I tend to agree. The Bowers one was interesting where I was like, all right, maybe there's something here, but otherwise he seems very cheap for someone who, to your point, wide receiver 2 in his second year over the last month, a little bit longer. Yeah, after that kind of trade, I need a drink.
All right, I had to stand up early because I got so worked up about the Troy Franklin thing. I had to stay. I normally sit until it's time to mix a drink, but I got so worked up about this Troy Franklin ridiculousness that I had to stand up. But let's talk a little bit about DFS here and mix a cocktail as well. Interesting week. If you guys have looked at the betting lines, if you guys have looked at the point totals this week, There's 3 games that are over 50 points right now for a point total. There are a lot of 2-score and over 1 touchdown favorites for this week. So there's a lot of weirdness going on in terms of how Vegas sees the matchups coming up this week. But we are going to try and take advantage of that. And the first one that we're going to go with, as always, we try to start with our quarterback. We try to talk about our quarterback. Now, Dan tried to bait me into, giving Bryce Young some undue love because I have been known to give Bryce Young some undue love. But I'm going to go with his opponent this week. We're going to go with Brock Purdy at quarterback for 5,900 here. Brock Purdy, listen, he came back last week and he picked up right where we hoped he would pick up. 3 touchdowns last week. He ended up the quarterback 6 in DraftKings scoring. For this week, he's only quarterback 11 in salary, but ECR wise, he's ranked quarterback 8. So you're already saving money in terms of just his ranking this week. He's the quarterback now. He's a top 10 quarterback on the year in points per game. And it's a small sample size because he missed so much of the year, but he's quarterback 9 in points per game here. Carolina, they're not a great matchup for fantasy quarterbacks, but I think part of that is because, teams don't feel like they have to throw on him a ton. But this game has a high point total. It's the Monday night game, by the way, if you guys haven't looked at that yet. It has a high point total, 48.5 points as of when I looked there on Sharp Football Analysis there. And Brock Purdy will be playing at home. Now, Carolina, they haven't been a great matchup for quarterbacks, but they have been vulnerable to the running back position. They have been vulnerable to the tight end position. Ask yourself, who really are the top 2 targets for Brock Purdy on that team? Oh, it's going to come out to be George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey, his tight end and his running back. I like that matchup. I am willing to spend only $5,900 to get Brock Purdy on my team this week. Not a lot of expensive quarterbacks this week anyway, but I like paying $5,900 for Brock Purdy there. So we'll take him. And we're going to pair him with that tight end, George Kittle at 5,200. I was really tempted. I was so tempted to go with Trey McBride, who is my guy. I love Trey McBride, and it's a good matchup this week. And I think that he's going to be their top receiver this week. But as Dan has pointed out repeatedly over the course of the season, Brock Purdy loves him some George Kittle, and George Kittle loves him some Brock Purdy. Those 2 are BFFs. And when Purdy gets back in the lineup, Kittle was going to take off. Well, guess what? He came back in the lineup, and last week, 2 of his 3 touchdowns went to George Kittle. Kittle was the tight end 2 in DraftKings scoring last week. Overall on the season, because he's missed some time, he's tight end 20, but he's tight end 6 in points per game. So he's already scoring a ton of points here, right?
Let me add a little quick fact. Steve Young and Brent Jones. Brock Purdy and George Kittle tied Steve Young and Brent Jones as far as the quarterback to tight end touchdown receptions.
Right there. Yes. And Dan would know that because he is the 49er fan here, but I'm throwing you threw me a bone with the first question of the day being a Bryce Young question. I'm throwing you a bone here talking about the 49ers in the DFS cocktail here. Kittle, listen, the feeling is mutual between the 2 guys. Like I said, Carolina has allowed the 11th most points to tight ends, so they are a good matchup there anyway. But in his last 4 games, George Kittle has caught 23 out of 24 targets for 226 yards and 4 touchdowns. He is on a roll, and he was on a roll before Brock Purdy got back. What do you think he's going to do now that his BFF, like I said, is back under center? We're going to pay less this week, like I said, at quarterback. Purdy's a little bit cheaper. I am honestly going to pay a lot less at running back this week because I think there are a ton of great affordable options at running back this week. So I feel like Kittle, even though he is the tight end, 5 in salary, he's expensive, and we don't typically like to spend up a quarterback or tight end, pardon me. I feel like he's a good value for this, and I feel like we've got the available salary because of where we're saving elsewhere there. Plus, if you look at it, when I looked at things, George Kittle grades out as the best value per point on the slate this week. So even though you're paying a little bit more than at tight end than you normally would, he's still going to, I feel, give you great value at that return. So I'm taking George Kittle. And then we're going to play back against these guys with my guy, Tetairoa McMillan. Now, again, Dan was trying to throw me a bone and he's trying to bait me with the Bryce Young question, but this is how I'm going to get my exposure to Bryce Young, even though I'm not taking Bryce Young. I'm going to take Tetairoa McMillan in a good matchup here this week for 5,900. He's the wide receiver 19 in salary on DraftKings, but he is the ECR wide receiver 13 on the week. And on the year, he's a top 10 receiver overall. Okay. So last week was by far Tetairoa's best fantasy and overall game of his career to this point. So this might feel a little bit like point chasing, but I've told you, we've talked about it already on this show, that there's a good point total for this game on Monday night. Carolina is going to have to pass because they're trailing, and San Francisco does give up the 7th most points to the wide receiver position. So I feel like this is a good spot for Tetairoa McMillan. If anybody is going to score on this team against the 49ers, it's going to be Tetairoa McMillan. And when I do my rankings and my projections, Tet grades out just behind Amon-Ra St. Brown in terms of value per dollar this week. And because we're saving money elsewhere, Amon-Ra St. Brown's not off of your radar if you want to put him in your lineup. But I am taking Tet McMillan this week and loving it at 5,900. And then the fourth guy that we're going with before we start to mix up our cocktail here is going to be Kenneth Walker, the running back for the Seattle Seahawks. Now, he's a cheap play this week. He's only 5,400 this week. And that's only 26th among running backs in terms of their DraftKings salary. And he's ranked this week as right about there, right? Running back 20. But Tennessee's been terrible against the run this year. We've talked about how bad this team is, period. Seattle's tied for the biggest favorite this week. They are over a 2-touchdown favorite this week. They're 13.5-point favorites so far. And we're talking about a team in Tennessee that gives up a ton of points. They're 7th. I think they give up the 7th most points to opposing running backs this week. Now, Seattle is on the road, but when you're facing a team as bad as Tennessee is, I'm not letting that kind of deter me. Zach Charbonnet, if you want to go that direction, he's an okay dart throw too, because he's going to get some short yardage situation type things. So if they're on the goal line, they might throw Zach Charbonnet in there. I don't expect Tennessee to stop him either, but for my money and for what they've been doing lately, I'll take Kenneth Walker all day long there at 5,400. So we're going to roll with Brock Purdy, George Kittle, Tetairoa McMillan, and Kenneth Walker. I would like to tell everybody to keep an eye on the injury situation around the league, because there are some possible excellent values that we'll maybe talk about in a minute here. But let's get to our drink here. We're talking about the divisional rivalry. That's what we're going to call this drink this week. This is a loose take on a drink, if you look it up, called the Sibling rivalry. But we're going to put together some ingredients that might, you think, fight against each other, but end up being a beautiful thing in the overall. Okay, so we're going to take first off an ounce of bourbon and an ounce of rye. We're having two different types of whiskeys here, but an ounce of bourbon and an ounce of rye. We're going to put those into our shaker here full of ice. Then we're going to add to that a half an ounce of pear liqueur. I'm going to put some sweet into that. Then a half an ounce of simple syrup and a half an ounce of lemon juice. Those are going to balance off the whiskeys there. We're going to put that into a glass full of ice, into a shaker full of ice. And we're going to shake that up. While I shake that up, and before I get on to how we construct the rest of this cocktail, Dan, Adam, your thoughts so far on either the 49er Carolina matchup, Kenneth Walker, or guys that you like to see in your lineup? Go ahead.
Well, those are all values that I've definitely highlighted myself, but I would also highlight Jacoby Brissett this week at $5,300. They're just going to throw. And Jacksonville, typically speaking, I know it didn't happen against the Chargers, but typically speaking, is a pass funnel team that you can attack. This game being in Arizona, I think that plays out a little bit better in their favor. If you really want to go for tournament leagues in particular, you want to take a deep lottery ticket, it would be a Chimere Dike. He's only $4,000. I talked about it earlier. Aomenor is out. Calvin Ridley is out. He's the last man standing. There's already been a rapport with him and Cam Ward going against Seattle. They're going to have to throw. And I am not afraid to pay up for the tight end position and go with Trey McBride at $6,800, who's been on an absolute tear, and pair him up with Jacoby Brissett this week since Brissett's been the quarterback. So those are some things I'm looking at. Adam, what do you got?
Yeah, another one to throw out. Derrick Henry against the Jets seems awesome. Especially with the money we've saved at a couple of these spots so far. I think that's a real option. If you want to go on the other end, stick it with the cheap guys we've been throwing out. Kareem Hunt is a really cheap option at running back who I think has a good shot. Obviously, you want to keep an eye on the Pacheco situation, but even then, he is still the goal line back. And I have a feeling that with Charvarius Ward coming off the IR, that they will be running in the red zone. So he's someone who I think is really interesting. But I like the lineup you put together.
Nope. All good points, guys. I appreciate all of those guys here. Like I said, I want to keep an eye on the Josh Jacobs injury in Green Bay, because if he is out, Emmanuel Wilson makes a great affordable play. It's a good matchup this weekend against the Vikings. Likewise, I am watching the Jaylen Warren situation in Pittsburgh, because if Jaylen Warren is out, Kenneth Gainwell makes a great play for Pittsburgh. I also like T. Higgins this week in a decent matchup with the Patriots, because Jamar Chase is out, suspended, and you can't go wrong with Trey McBride. It's a great matchup this weekend anyway against the Jaguars. He's going to get targeted, but we're already using Kittle. So if there was ever a week that you might want to use 2 tight ends, you probably could get away with this week. But at any rate, we shook our cocktail. We strained it into a glass with ice. Now that glass that we're using, the rocks glass we're using, we're going to rinse that before we pour our drink into it. We're going to rinse that with cinnamon schnapps. If you don't know how to rinse it, you take about a quarter of a teaspoon or so, put it in the glass before you put any ice or anything in it. Kind of roll that all around so that it kind of coats the inside of the glass. Toss out the remainder. So we're going to rinse that glass with cinnamon schnapps. We shook up our cocktail. We poured it in. We've got it there. We're going to put a cinnamon stick in that thing for a nice little garnish there to look good. And that is going to be your divisional rivalry right there. Good luck to everybody. Slan Java on the drink, and good luck on your daily lineups. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers indeed. Before we get off the show, Keon Coleman is going to be benched again against the Houston Texans. If you're listening or watching the show for that Thursday game, he has pissed off some guys behind the scenes. All right. With that, hopefully we haven't made you mad, because hopefully you've been dominating by watching or listening to Operation Domination on your favorite podcast app or on the Fantasy Football Advice Network YouTube channel at FF Advice Net. Guys, we'll be back tomorrow with Dr. Brian Scott with the injury reports, and of course on Saturday with Chaz Flaherty of Sports Betting Weekly as we line your pockets green. So we'll see you then.